This is Lenny DellaRocca with South Florida Poetry Journal, SoFloPoJo, along with Michael McInerney here to interview Steve Kronen, who will be reading at the Miami Book Fair next week. And Stephen, thank you so much for coming up to talk with us.
Thank you for having me.
You're reading, what date and time are you going to be reading at the book fair?
I'm going to be reading almost 1 week exactly from now, next Saturday, starting at 1:30.
And are you on a panel? Are you with other poets?
I'm with other South Florida, Miami poets, Scott Cunningham, Barbara Nightingale, and
somebody else. That's okay.
This is embarrassing.
That's all right. Don't worry about it.
Can we redo this?
No. We're good. This is the way this rolls. We roll like this. No worries.
Scott, Barbara, and Mia.
And
Mia.
Mia.
I figured
My friend Mia.
Oh, how can we forget?
This is embarrassing.
Well, you're going to be reading from your new book, which is homage to Mistress Oppenheimer. And I wanted to ask you about the title and how the poems all fit into that, if you will.
The title, it's playing off Berryman's homage to Mistress Bradstreet, his '56 publication, which really broke up big for him. And so I'm playing off that title. And Mistress Oppenheimer, in this case, is the wife of, it's Kitty Oppenheimer, the wife of J. Robert Oppenheimer, who was the father of the Manhattan Project.
He was a physicist, I think.
Physicist during the war, in the development of the bomb. Not that I am promoting the development of bombs, but it's more encapsulating that period in my childhood, which came soon thereafter.
Right.
You know.
And that's a strategy that Berryman uses too, with his homage.
Well, he does, in that it focuses on Anne Bradstreet and her poems, one of the first poets, and being a woman especially, in the Americas. And inherent in that is a beginnings, as was the U.S. and the world after the war, and where things could go wrong, terribly wrong. You know, coming in, wiping out the Native Americans, etc., setting a course that we're still suffering under Donald Trump, impossibly, or not impossibly, that's the point, being president of the United States now.
Do you have a poem that you'd like to read? I often ask when we do these to read a poem that you might read at the book fair. Do you know what you're going to read at the book fair? Can you,
pretty much.
Could you pick a poem that you're going to read there? One that you'd like to read?
Sure. How about...
And then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Okay, I'll start with the opening poem, which I'm going to read today also. This is Gimme That, Don't Smite Me. And the title, like, I think about how human beings, and I'll probably repeat this in an hour, how human beings, we have basically two prayers in our lives. Either give me that or don't smite me. And so that's the title. It's a villanelle. Give me that, don't smite me. The smear beneath the microscope lamplight is like stained glass midsummer. Don't smite me. When the sun, broken free of the squat horizon, burns off pixel and photon and simmers, give me that. Mid-sky, heating the air, making the sperm tail kite flash and plunge and rise over the heads of the swimmers. Don't smite me. Themselves plunging and rising, rising and plunging. What did we want then? Up to our waists in the luxurious ocean. The somersaulting, give me that. toy at its height, that we could dismiss it with a splashing hand. Some more, some more, some more. Don't smite me. The sun, growing small as a period, as if it couldn't be placed one day at the end of the list, the sentence, the summary. Give me that. Don't smite me.
I love your entries into the poems, and I've often wondered how you start a particular poem. And I know there's all kinds of variations, and I'm sure there's different ways you do that. But in this particular poem, can you talk a little bit about what sparked that, how you entered it, what came, do you remember?
I don't remember specifically, but I'm guessing thinking about how human beings have two prayers. Give me that, don't smite me.
Yeah.
And I remember playing, trying to make a terzarima, and finally that the villanelle would fit, and I played with different lines and tried doing different things till it finally worked out this way.
What happens as you're writing that comes to you that says, okay, this is where this is going to end? We talked about how you entered it. In leaving it off and ending it, how do you, when you're writing, I guess there's this natural conclusion that you seem to reach probably inside yourself, maybe even before it gets onto the page, maybe, I don't know. But as you're writing it, do you know where it's going? Do you know where it's going to end or how it's going to end?
No. I mean, again, this is a villanelle, so
there, the form is going to dictate.
The form is going to dictate, at least structurally, where it's going to end. Thematically, though, I don't know.
Yeah.
As none of us do, as we're writing. You have to listen to the poem and guide it. Let it guide you. And but that's one of the advantages. When I get to the last line of a villanelle, I know I'm at the last line of the villanelle. But whether it's going to work or not is
right. The question then is, did I get it done?
Exactly. Did I get it done? I mean, you can have the form there.
The skeleton is there, but there's the flesh hanging on it real nice, and it doesn't look pretty. Exactly. The book is sort of there's lots of, you use form a lot. You're doing a lot with form here.
Yes.
And I think you've pretty much always have written in a lot of form. No, over the years.
Yes.
Right. I mean, I remember you reading back in the '80s. I think when we met back at Books and Books, I think is where I first coming across you.
I think so.
And I think even then you were writing in form, right?
Yes, from the very beginning. In fact, that's how I taught myself to write, by writing sonnets.
Right.
And sonnets specifically, but just trying out all different sort of forms. And the advantage being, just as we were discussing, you know when you're at the end. But it gives you, I've used this example before. It's like a myelin sheath in that it conducts the energy, having that form there. Yeah. So you can't just wander off into space.
Yeah. Yeah. You're kind of. It's at once confining, and then on the other hand, it's
very freeing.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you discover things that you would not have because you are confined, and you have to come up with that sort of solution for that particular form.
I'm going to throw this out there, and I might be wrong, but Warren, do I have it right? You're pretty much a big fan, or maybe even a student of Donald Justice. I know he's been like your favorite poet. Am I right about that?
Yes, yes. He, as you know, Don was born here in Miami, so there's that natural connection. But I always admired him very much. In other poets of that era, the big three for me being Donald Justice and Anthony Hecht and Richard Wilbur. Richard Wilbur died about a year ago or so. Yeah. But Don I met through Peter Schmidt, who's a wonderful poet here in Miami, and Peter had been a student of Don's in Iowa.
Okay.
So Don came to Miami to do a reading at Books and Books,
Okay.
and so I was able to meet him
Right.
then, and then got to be friends with him.
Yeah.
And, made sure I went to Swanee when he was there,
Yeah.
and Bread Loaf when he was there, and then when he'd come to visit Miami, we'd get together and
Oh, cool.
see him.
Yeah.
Because he's utterly brilliant. Just
And you showed him your work. He's
Mm-hmm.
made comments and sort of pushed you here and there and
Yeah.
guiding you along.
I'd show him my work.
Yeah.
I remember him telling me, I forget what poem it was,
Right.
but the meter wasn't very good, and he said, you got to show him who's boss.
That's a great.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I would feel, somebody of that stature,
Uh-huh.
it could be really great. But then, if the criticism isn't all that terrific, you kind of like, oh shit,
Well, it's scary,
right?
but I mean, you might as well go to the best
Absolutely.
and get criticism from the very best.
Sure.
So there's nothing to lose there.
Right.
And he was always very kind to me and very
Yeah.
gracious.
In the book, this is what, your fourth book?
Third book.
Third book. What came about? How did you come about to write this book? In other words, did you start off thinking you were going to write this particular collection, or did the poems happen first? It was the poems that came along, and then you decided that they were going to be in the collection.
Yes, the latter. In that I just write
Yeah.
when I have X amount.
Sure.
Then supposedly there's a book there.
There's a certain amount of religious tinged poems in here. You bring religion into
Uh-huh.
some of these poems. Can you talk about, are you a religious person? Is it a part of your life, or is it just come up in your poetry? Or
That's a good question. Not formally speaking, I don't see any real difference between religion and science.
okay,
So it's that which is.
Yeah.
We are. Consciousness is.
Right.
So we can ghettoize it, and we have to, because here's this,
Yeah.
and the molecules come
Right,
together,
right.
and we're seduced by linearity in time.
Sure.
So, and science and religion, they're both asking how, why, how does this function?
Mm.
So,
Is there a poem that you'd like that speaks to that idea that you might want to read?
maybe. I'll do the next one.
Okay.
Schrodinger's Cab.
Yeah. Cab? Yeah.
Cab.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm
Yes,
Obviously
yes.
playing.
Cat, all right.
And there's a little epigraph from Walter J. Moore from his biography, Schrodinger's Life and Thought, and the quote is, they did not dare take a taxi to the station for fear their departure might be reported to the authorities. He and his wife had to leave, now I forget, I think it was Paris quickly? I forget. They had to get out,
Right.
and who knows who was going
Sure.
to tell, et cetera, et cetera. This is a villanelle also. Schrodinger's Cab. I'm going to read these poems again.
Well, that's okay.
So
Most everybody's out there. So.
Schrodinger's Cab. You won't be sure of its arrival until it rolls up to your curb. Wave, the cabbie'll say, farewell. All you own's inside your satchel. The cabbie says you'll beat the curfew. You won't be sure of his arrival, or if these roads lead to the terminal, where, huddled in their roundhouse, cars point to or from the far walls of your city. You'll pat your pockets for the schedule. The cab backfires and hugs its curve, and you won't be sure if it's a rifle or why the heart, beating out the spatial, is agitated at its core. Something at the center feral. These posted signs, the engines purr, you're traveling light along this course. You won't be sure just how your eye falls, where you're bound, and why that feels, in passing, like free will.